to the Spirit of Watercolor. Linda's back in her studio, and we are still learning and still growing with our watercolors, right? And I'm so glad to see you again. Okay, so we've talked about the transparency of watercolor. That was the first of the three-part series. Then the granulation, and now we need to talk finally about the staining and lightfastness of our watercolor paints. Two different things, but they're both important to your watercolor painting to make it successful and vibrant and beautiful and long-lasting. All those things we're looking for, so that we're going to want to continue to enjoy painting, feel satisfied, feel confident, feel like we're doing the best we can do with our paints, right? That's the whole idea of my series, is to keep us interested, right? Keep us inspired and excited and enjoying this wonderful hobby or actual painting for galleries or shows or selling or just hanging up, giving to your friends, making successful cards. There's so many things you can do with this medium, and you can decide. It's not something where you have to do just one of those. You can do 2 or 3 or more, and you know, change from time to time which of those you want to do. Okay, so please, if you like this video, like and please subscribe, because you know I'm trying to keep this going and keep a lot of people inspired and motivated, and then we'll have more watercolors in the world, which makes the world a better place, right? Okay, so let me just grab my little tablet here. We talked about transparencies, and we talked about granulation, and in my last video I was showing you how I am swatching colors, and then let me go to the first page here. Then you can see if they have granulation or not, right? And that is how I did it with the pencil lines, and then I put the initials or, you know, the names of the paints. And then once they dried, you could see which had no granulation or some granulation or a lot of granulation, right? Okay. Now, here's the thing. With staining colors, you can do a very similar thing to see if your paints, because they don't all stain. Some lift very easily, okay? So you will paint them, and then once they dry, to take your paper towel, okay, let me grab that just as an example for you here. And once that paint is dry, then you can, you know, wet your paper towel damply and then press and see what comes off of the paints. Then you could mark on your board or next to the paint whether it stains or not. You also can tell by how much paint lifts off of it, right? Okay. Now, this thing about staining paint is that staining paint is the paint you want to put down first. When you are mixing colors, you can mix them together on your palette, and also to mix paint, which another way to get more transparent, luminous looking watercolors, you can put the staining colors down first. Say like an ultramarine blue, and you put that down and you let it dry, and then being that it's staining, then you can put on a non-staining paint such as a yellow that doesn't stain in your palette, and glaze that over the blue once it's dried, and you will get a beautiful luminous green. Okay, now if you put the non-staining paint down first, this is the important part, okay? You put that down and then you glaze the blue over it, it will mix, because the non-staining one's going to, when it's wet, lift off, okay? So that's the important thing about the staining paints. All right, that's mainly what that's about, and I just wanted to do that in a nutshell quickly so you'll kind of understand it. And then you can swatch your paints from your palette like we were doing here. I've started to swatch my blues and my greens over here now. I do it out of order. You can do it one at a time in order if you like, but I like to swatch a color and let it dry, and maybe swatch one over here so that I don't, if this one isn't all the way dry, this one won't run into it. And then down here I'm going to put my greens. And anyway, that's how I do it. So, and then you can see if your paints are staining or not, and you'll know which ones to glaze, as they call it, which is the way of mixing on the paper, glazing. If you've heard that term, you glaze the staining color down, let it dry, and then glaze your over top of that, the color you want to mix over that. Okay, pretty cool, right? That's just a tip that's so good to know. All right, now I just want to talk quickly and shortly about Lightfastness. That is different. That's about how long the paints will last, but in a different way. Lightfastness means that your paints have, some of them are more permanent than others. Like if you glaze a color down, the color you see that is beautiful and bright and rich and lovely. If it's light fast, if it's extremely light fast, has excellent light fast ratings, it will stay that way. There are paints that are, and they go on a scale, I think it's 1 to 4, 4 being the most light fast, and then they go down to, you know, the least light fast, and then those that are terribly not light fast at all and they will fade out in time are called fugitive paints. Fugitive paints you want to think about. If you're going to use those paints, because say Opera Pink, which is an absolute favorite of many people, and Alizarin Crimson, they are fugitive paints. They will not stay on the paper forever. Now you won't see that for years to come, but in due course, if you sell a painting, the person that purchased it and loved that vibrancy of the painting will be very disappointed if it doesn't hold that over a long period of time, and the painting will change, it'll fade, those colors. Unless you're using them, some people will use these colors, but then maybe they're using them for printing purpose. They'll print the paintings for something like cards or whatnot, or they might be photographing them for some purpose. Then of course the color is going to stay, right? So you can use them. But there are things like like say the alizarin crimson paint, it's also got a permanent one now that's been created. I have it. It slightly varies to me in the color in the brand that I use, but not enough to not use it for me. Now someone else might say, that is not exactly the alizarin crimson that I love and adore. They do act differently, slightly differently. The colors vary a little bit. But, you know, if you don't want paints that are going to fade, then you want to check when you go in your catalog, your any art catalog that has watercolor paints in it, you're going to want to look at the light fast ratings on them, and it will tell you if it's extremely excellent with light fastness or if it isn't. And also in the catalogs you will see that there are ratings of how transparent they are, which gives you some idea, but I still like to record my own palette here because just saying it's semi-transparent or transparent or opaque just gives you some idea. You know, it doesn't give you a completely clear picture. When I look at this and I can see how transparent this lemon yellow is here, you know, it's good to know, and it's better to see how transparent it is here than if I just look at a rating. But that gives you some idea. So if you're buying and ordering things online, you can kind of get some idea. You know it's basically more transparent or less transparent. And so those things are good to know, and those are things that you'll find in the ratings, the little numbers and little things that they'll guide you through the paints. You have to look in the tiny print on those books and those catalogs and get some of the information, okay? I think also you will find that some will talk about granulation and what they call sediment or not, how sedimentary or not it is. And that's helpful too. So those are things that you can find out to some degree, but I totally and highly recommend recording your information like this, and you can see. Now, I am calling this just my granulation check. When I finish with the pages of my granulation checks, I am going to go to a new page and do this again and put in my little pencil lines and write my names of my paints again for the staining qualities, because if I start lifting on the ones that are about granulation, I might disrupt the granulation. I don't know. It's just better to have separated ones. And again, if you go back to my video on transparencies, you will see the magic marker thing where you put the black magic marker down like a big Sharpie, big fat Sharpie pen, and then you swatch these paint colors through, and you will see how transparent to not they are, as we talked and you see in that book that I showed you. So those are the three, I want to say three, you could say four if you include the Lightfastness, which I think is a down the road thing. It's not something a new beginner painter has to be super concerned about, but down the road, if you find your work is becoming successful, people like it, they might buy it, then you have to consider that as well. Okay, so I really talk about the three main characteristics, qualities of paint, and then that's just an added bonus for you. Okay, so thank you so much again for watching today. It's a pleasure to give you all the tips and tricks and videos on watercolors. It's just a joy for me, and I hope that it helps you to get in there and get painting and get confident and love what you do. Okay, thank you so much again for joining. It's always a pleasure. Like I said before, let's stay tuned for some more demonstrations, of which I want us to get in and have a lot of fun. As the spring is evolving now, we're getting a lot more wonderful things to look at and to paint. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.